Hey, so welcome to another episode of the FLŌ TRIBE Podcast, where I get to interview the movers, breathers, teachers, and healers of the world. So in this episode, I got to speak with Dr. Winnie Monaco. So Dr. Monaco is a chiropractor, she's a yoga instructor, and she's also the founder of Dr. Monaco's Natural Remedies, which are this amazing line of CBD-based products. So in this conversation, we talk about all things healing. We talk about chiropractic medicine, and I had a whole bunch of questions about that because, to be honest, it's a type of medicine that I've always kind of hesitated about and had a lot of questions about, and she not only answered those questions for me, but she helped me have a whole new perspective on what that type of medicine has to offer. And we also talk about her journey that led her to start her company. This was an amazing conversation. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Winnie Monaco. So before we jump into this amazing conversation with Dr. Monaco, I wanted to take a second to talk about Dr. Monaco's Natural Remedies, which are a line of specialty CBD products. So I've been using CBD for years. I use it for pain, I use it for anxiety, I use it to help me sleep. But up until recently, I just assumed that CBD is CBD. What makes one product better than another? Until I discovered Dr. Monaco's products. So what Dr. Monaco has done is she recognized that though CBD is great for all of the uses I mentioned, there are a lot of other great natural remedies that we can use for those same purposes. So I'll give you a great example, her Calm formula, which is by far the one I use the most. So the Calm formula contains a high level of super pure CBD, but it also has ingredients like magnesium and kava and valerian root and evening primrose and lavender, which are also recognized as helping with anxiety, as helping with sleep. So by combining these ingredients, she's basically creating a superior product. So not only do you get the powerful effects of CBD, but you're enhancing it with all of these other great ingredients. So I highly, highly recommend these products. She has a formula for pain, she has a formula for women's health, she has a formula for healing, she even has a formula for our pets. All right, these are amazing products. I can't recommend them enough. And for anybody listening, if you check out the link below, you can get 10% off if you order with the link that's provided. So now, without further ado, let's hear this conversation with Dr. Winnie Monaco. Hey, Winnie, so thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. So why don't we start by having you introduce yourself by letting us know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Winnie Monaco. I am a chiropractor. I've been in practice for 21 years now. My background, I have an undergraduate degree in biology and a minor in chemistry. And then I have a chiropractic degree, and I also have some osteopathy training in manipulation with a French osteopath whose name is Dr. Guy Voyer. And I finished that in 2016, and kind of that really sent my practice in a whole kind of different direction and looking at things just slightly differently. Those two disciplines really complement each other. So it really felt like completing the picture of my education in a really great way that's been beneficial to my patients.
And so you mentioned biology, chemistry. Now, how did you go from that to then going into the healing business, or so to speak?
Well, that's always the precursor here in the States, is that you study an undergraduate degree in science if you're going into any kind of healthcare. And I always knew I was going to go into healthcare. And I just wasn't sure what avenue. I had a serious spinal fracture in second grade and had a chiropractor my whole life that helped me heal from that. And so it always seemed just like a normal piece of the puzzle. You had a doctor, you had a dentist, you had a chiropractor. Like, I didn't see it as alternative medicine in any way because it was such a regular part of my life growing up. And my mom was really into, I was raised not eating meat. I was raised that exercise and plants were pretty much the solution, and food was the solution to almost anything that was going on with you. So she was definitely more of a progressive person. And so I was always raised thinking that was just what everyone did. So actually, when I finished undergraduate, I had been given an opportunity to do some research in neurology and be a research assistant for some doctors in LA. And it was fascinating work. We did brain mapping that was instrumental in writing the code for the Gamma knife, which wasn't used on the regular back then. Now you hear people go, oh yeah, they used the Gamma knife to do this or that, which back then it was, I mean, this was a long time ago, 23 years ago or so. So anyway, that was my introduction really into what it looks like to maybe go into healthcare on the allopathic side, even in research. And it was amazing work. But I knew it was disease care, right? It was after the body had failed and really couldn't heal itself anymore. What does medicine have to offer? And I do think we have an amazing system for that. We really do. But, my mom and just the way we were raised, she raised me, and her ideas about health were very much proactive. If you ate certain foods, if you moved your body every day, if you took care of your, all the parts, right? Your spirit, your body, that you would be healthy. And I really wanted to focus on maximum health potential more than what happens after the body's broken down. So I decided to go, since I'd had a chiropractor my whole life, I decided while I'm doing this research project, I'm going to go work for a couple of different chiropractors part-time. And it really just was the right fit for me. I knew that was where I belonged. Once I had really immersed myself in what it looked like on a daily basis to deal with people who maybe were injured, or maybe not, maybe healthy patients just trying to maximize their health potential and really stay well. So, it was just the right fit for me. And I loved all the different places really that my education took me, from rehabilitation to serious neurological issues and how to rehab those things. So I think it's given me a real diversity in what I can look at. And you can aid the body no matter what it's experiencing. Even if you're not the doctor treating it, you can still help the body be better at getting well and healing no matter what. So
yeah, and I think that's a very common issue right now, is the fact that we wait until we have symptoms. We wait until there's a serious issue before we actually do something about it. Right. And I love that, you brought up nutrition, because I think that is highly underestimated and how powerful that is, especially in terms of, just providing the building blocks that your body needs to maintain itself, to repair itself. Right. And again, we wait until it's too late and okay, now you need to change your diet after you've had the heart attack, after you've been diagnosed with diabetes or whatever that is. Right. The other thing you brought up that I'm really curious about is you mentioned, so when I growing up, for whatever reason, I don't know where these ideas came from, but chiropractor was always seen as this kind of, I don't know, this kind of weird next to medicine kind of thing, where you just heard stories of oh, they're just going to crack your neck and they're going to do all these weird things to you. And people have been injured by chiropractors, and be careful with those. And so I'd be curious to know, and now I've been treated by you once and I didn't get that feeling at all. Right. And I'd be curious to know, where does that come from? Where does that idea of chiropractors come from?
That comes, do you want me to be honest, or should I,
well, I think it's too late now that you said you want me to be honest.
That comes from, and I am not somebody that I don't have an adversarial relationship with allopathic medicine. I'm married to another doctor who's a pharmacologist. So it's not that I'm hating on them, but that comes from the American Medical Association and their need to keep control of a population like it's pie, you're going to steal patients from them. And it's that's a ridiculous notion that you would replace a medical doctor with someone who's focused on a totally different system, which is the neuromusculoskeletal system, something your medical doctor is going to, for the most part, ignore. So it's a very strange, but again, this goes, you always follow the money. Unfortunately, that's how it works. And, we do, even though I think it's one of the best systems in the world that we have here, medicine is for profit. And when profit is involved, that causes people to do things that are sometimes shady, or they're inflammatory, or whatever. Now, I've worked in an office with traditional doctors, and I was there for like 10 years, and we didn't have any of that. And I worked with a neurologist who sent me patients. I worked with all kinds of other doctors. It really depends on how you educate the people around you about what you're doing, and how you talk to them, and how you respect their part of the medical system too. And I think, I had a great relationship with all of those doctors. So that comes from a place of fear, as usual, like fear of losing control, fear of losing patients, fear of losing revenue, whatever. That's very old thinking, right? That we don't really see. You don't see it as much anymore. Like if a doctor says that, like I always tell people, how old is your doctor that said that? I mean, that's a pretty ancient way of thinking. Now, traditional medicine's come a long way, where they recognize the benefits of acupuncture and sometimes naturopathy and chiropractic, because again, there are areas that they don't want to deal with anyway. Like the doctors would tell me, I don't want to deal with low back pain. Like, what am I going to do with that? Like, I can't do really anything for it, again. So it's just about knowing like where you want to fit in the piece of the puzzle, and then presenting it that way. If you go in there saying like, well, we don't need, I don't need any of what you're doing, you're creating, conflict there. And I just don't see it that way. I wouldn't not have a medical doctor any more than I wouldn't not have a dentist. So
yeah,
that's always been my approach. And so I haven't ruffled very many feathers.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense in saying you don't want to be confrontational, and you want to say, look, there's a place for this type of medicine. There's a place for this type of medicine. And,
right.
And for me, I think I was introduced to this idea very early on being from Montreal, where osteopathy is very popular.
For sure. Yeah.
And actually when I came to the States, I was surprised at how few osteopaths were available, especially in New York. I found that in California, there seems to be a few more than there were in New York, but New York, it was very rare. As we're in Montreal, because there's a school of osteopathy in Montreal, there's more and more of these coming up.
Yeah, that happened.
And my first experience with an osteopath was very strange, but incredible at the same time, where this was the first time that I felt like, why are you dealing with this part of my body if I came in with pain in this part of my body? Right. It was like I had back pain, but suddenly he's looking at my feet. He's looking at my skull. He's right. And that was I guess my introduction to this idea of holistic medicine, where look, just because you have pain here doesn't mean that's the source. Right. Sometimes we have to dig deeper. We have to explore. And then over time, I've also learned about how, there can even be emotional components and stress-based components, and the way that our body kind of, can hold on to stress in our fascia, in our muscles. And that can be, over time, especially if you don't find ways to deal with that stuff can accumulate and eventually cause all kinds of problems. And so I know you also mentioned that you do have some training in osteopathy. So what brought that on? What was your interest there? Was it just further education? Was there a certain experience that you had that made you want to do that?
Well, osteopathy and chiropractic were kind of born together. And it was only because of two rival doctors that the ideas really split into two factions. Osteopathy taking the focus and running with the movement of the breath and the blood, and chiropractic taking on the focus of the nervous system and neural tone and the flow of energy through the nervous system. And so when you learn about chiropractic history, you learn about this. And if you really are thinking about that, you need all of those together to really have a complete picture, right? Like they don't function independently of each other. Again, that's, we've seen traditional or non-traditional medicine still become kind of like allopathic medicine in a lot of ways, as it's tried to gain respect. We've become morphed into something that really is more like allopathic medicine, where we go, well, I'm just going to worry about the nervous system. Well, that's crazy. The nervous system's influenced by the breath and the blood flow, right? So I had a good friend of mine that had been studying with this osteopath from France. And one of the reasons osteopathy and this French method is preferable, is if you notice there are a lot of DOs in the United States, you just wouldn't know. They don't function any differently. Most of them don't manipulate. To find one that's still doing traditional manipulation is very different. You might come across a DO and not even have any idea, because he's just going to write you a script and send you on your way. So, my friend started studying with this guy, and he's the real deal, still does real traditional manipulation. And he was trying to get me to always study with him. And I'm like, Jason, I do not have time for this. I'm an ART doctor as well. So for a long time, I had contracts with them, and I was doing things with the Ironman. So I really just didn't have the time. And my kids were smaller. So when I forget why, he was great. He was always just really encouraging me, as soon as you have the time. So I entered the program. It's kind of like a bridge program for doctors that already have some kind of experience, whether they're physical therapists or chiropractors or trainers or MDs. So it's kind of like the way to bridge this for the American students. And the program was sponsored through a school in Montreal. And so that took about 4 years to finish with him, but really just amazing. It really brought together the whole picture for me in a way that we learn a lot of it in chiropractic school. You learn about, the field of tissue affecting the organs, but in osteopathy, they just that's what one of their tenements. And it really reinforced all the things that I had learned that we kind of shy away from, again, because we're trying to not seem, you don't want to seem too out there. But again, it kind of ties back into diet. And really, again, one of the reasons why the spine is so important is all your organs are attached to it. And the field of tissue, which is very dependent on the things you ate or the things you drink, affects the organs that live in the tissue. So again, the terrain of the organs dictated by tissue health and spinal mobility for the organs is paramount to good health, as well as in osteopathy, you really focus again on the movement of the cerebrospinal fluid with the breath and how that affects the quality of your life. So it really just brought everything kind of in a more succinct way back into focus, that I think in a lot of ways over years, you wind up seeing a lot of injuries, and you become very injury focused if that's what your practice is looking like. And if you're working with athletes, it does get really like, okay, we've got to rehab this injury and get this person going again. So it really brought my focus back a little bit into a more well-rounded approach to some of my patients. Some aren't interested in that, and that's okay too. Not everybody's there yet.
Yeah. But I like what you said also about, with athletes. And one thing though that athletes did turn me on to, and this was when I was in the fight game and training a lot of professional fighters, some of the fighters at the highest level had either a chiro or an osteopath kind of as part of their team.
For sure.
And this was someone that they went to see with or without injury.
Yes.
Because they realized that sometimes you're right on the edge of an injury. Right. Sometimes your body is in a position where, okay, if we go a little bit further, that's when the injury is going to happen. So Absolutely. They would rather go in, and it was like on, every month or every 2 weeks or whatever their setup was, to make sure that we're going to make these adjustments and we're going to realign things so that we don't end up in a case of a serious injury. Right.
And I think that's typical of a professional athlete, for sure. You're part of their
smart
team.
professional athlete. Some athletes don't really see it that way. But
or they don't know, they don't get the exposure.
100%. And I think that to me is just common, for everyone should be
for sure
this concept, and not just, the physical, but all of it. Right. Even the nutrition part, or like I said before, so many people wait till it's too late. And then they're trying to turn back the clock. But especially as you get older, I mean, some things you just can't reverse, right? I mean, we can do the best we can to try to fix whatever you're dealing with. But, sometimes it's just too late. And it's too bad, though, that we have this mentality of just kind of, we're just going to go until something breaks. And then we're going to hope that, the medical industry can fix it for us.
Right.
And so it sounds to me like on your journey, you had all of these pages in the book, and then you just added all the pages that were missing with the osteopathy, right? And
That's, yeah.
kind of brought everything together for you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and it gave me a little bit more confidence to focus on these things that are considered, they're pretty radical ideas when you compare them to traditional medicine. They're not radical to me, but they are different, and even in some more holistic schools don't get taught that way. So yeah, it was great. And it was actually one of the things about it that was really awesome too, was getting, a lot of the doctors weren't from the United States that were in the program. They were from, New Zealand or France or the UK. And so getting really a different picture of what this kind of healthcare looks like, or what their healthcare system looks like in different countries, was very eye-opening as well. And awesome, like really to experience.
Okay.
And I still keep in touch with a lot of them. So it's really been very cool. So is
there anything that comes to mind? Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of the differences? Just because I've lived in two systems. I've lived in Montreal for most of my life, and living in that type of healthcare, and then coming to the US, where obviously it's an insurance game.
Right.
Having free healthcare in Montreal has its pros and cons. Pro
For
being
sure.
it's free, and you never have to really think about the fact that, oh, I might not be able to afford this or not. But
Right.
that also comes with the fact that sometimes things happen very slowly, and you don't
Right.
always get the best care possible. As
Right.
where when I came to the US, luckily we had really good insurance, and then I saw
Right.
that, oh, I can get an appointment tomorrow. Like, things were so much faster. Things happen
Yeah.
so much quicker here. But again, it all depends on what type of insurance you have and all that. So is there anything that you noticed maybe comparing to other
I
healthcare
didn't
systems?
notice as much from like a business standpoint, just because those things, I have friends that practice in New Zealand and some of that, so I'm kind of aware of those things already. What really struck me was the difference in the patients. So like if we were typically the doctor would maybe have patients for us to do a case on, so the last couple days or whatever. And if they were an American, their approach is so different. The approach from an American is like, what are you going to do to my body to fix it? And I noticed that the French were much more like, well, what do I need to do to stay well? And they get naked, just naked for the exam. There's, which Dr. Guy is a big proponent of, so you can see stuff, not naked, but take your clothes off. And Americans are very, very much like, what do you want me to do? They got a sweatshirt on, and they're like, all right, see what's wrong. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna have to see more of your body. But no, it's more about like the way that I think it's more of a European idea that the patient's going to participate. And that could have been just those people we saw, but it did seem to be like they knew there'd be more involvement on their part.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty common though, where, because I've been, from 20 years of martial arts training, I've been on many a physiotherapist's table or osteopath's table. And, and for me, the one feedback I always got was they were amazed at how participant I was in my own healing process, meaning that for a lot of people, and this is a frustration, and I'm sure you've had that same frustration, where you can only do so much with 1 hour with that person, right? Especially if it's some sort of mechanical issue or some sort of lifestyle issue, like then they have to go home and continue that work if they really want to get results. And I mean, I'm all about that, and I would always do the work. In fact, I would do more than I had to. But I think the big frustration is, okay, you go to someone like you and you're going to do what you can in that time, but then they're going to go home with breathing exercises, stretches, you name it. And if they don't do it, well, and then they'll get frustrated that it's not working. Right.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know that it's just in the US, because I know plenty of people in Montreal who had the same.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just people want the easy fix. People want the easy fix, right?
And a lot of my patients are amazing and really go the extra mile and utilize me in a way that I think is more cost effective too, which is I should be teaching you how to take care of yourself. Otherwise, if you're just using me like a giant Tylenol, that's a really expensive Tylenol. Like you can just take getting out of pain is easy, right? We have pills for that. Honestly, like if you don't, that's not my choice to go that direction. But I think again is learning, like you're part of what your dentist does, right? Is teach you like how to take care of your teeth. You're not flossing right. You're not doing this. They encourage you, right? Or they should, or they shame you. You can do that. Sometimes they do that too. But I try not to shame my poor patients. But really teaching them about their own body. We've become very disconnected. And I do think that's the way traditional medicine has focused, right? They don't teach you what's going on. They hand you a medicine that's going to fix it. And I do think that people, the more connected you can get them to their own bodies by participating, the better in tune they are with what's going on. And the very best doctor for your body is you. I'm not in your body. I don't know what's going on. So the more in tune you are, the more, you can let somebody else know this is how it feels. This is what I'm experiencing, and maybe get a little bit more of that, intuition about how to take care of it as well.
Yeah. Take responsibility for your own body.
And exercise that. That's a part of the brain that if you're not using, isn't going to be great at it. So it's like you can get better at all of these things. You can gain awareness. Again, we're talking about neurology, right? When I give somebody exercises for rehabilitation, it's not just about the joint. It's about the neurology influencing that area or the musculature in that area. And the nervous system needs patterns and repetition. And that's a very individual process. I can't say for one person how many repetitions it will take for something to become a pattern compared to someone else. It's something we have to discover together.
Yeah, 100%. And just to touch a bit on what you were saying about taking responsibility, one thing I learned, I worked as a martial arts trainer, I also worked as a personal trainer. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed was, I think one of the failures that I recognized in just the way that personal training works for a lot of people was I had a group of clients, and when I left Montreal to go somewhere else, obviously I could not continue training them.
Sure.
And I caught up with one of them a year later and asked how things were going. He's like, "Oh, you'd be ashamed of me. I've put on so much weight, that. I'm like, "Well, what did you do well, he's like, "Well, you left." Right. And I didn't have another trainer. So that was it. And I'm like, whoa, okay, well, there's a failure, right? Because I think that even as trainers, as anyone, we should be trying to create people that feel some sort of responsibility for themselves, that should be able to take care of themselves. Like if you can't take care of yourself without hiring, like great, like obviously I had to make a living and I'm very happy that person hired me, but there was also this sense of, wow, like I should be doing more to make this person feel autonomous for their own health. Right. So yeah, I think that's an interesting failure there for sure, because I think that we need to try to find ways to help people feel like some sort of responsibility for their own bodies and their own health. So something also you mentioned was breathing. And for me, that has been probably the most powerful discovery I've made in the past 10 years was just how powerful breath training can be. Now, obviously we all breathe. We have to breathe if we want to be alive. But what I noticed was first understanding how breath training can help with mental health, how it can help us take control of stress and anxiety in such a great way. But then also recently learning how it can be used for pain management, how it can also be used to manipulate your own nervous system. Right. Sure. Like sometimes the nervous system is something we think we have no control over, but learning that, if I breathe this way, I can trigger the sympathetic. If I breathe this way, I can trigger the parasympathetic. I can manipulate the breath in so many different ways to trigger so many different reactions. So what's your take on breathing? And because you introduced me to some breathing techniques that I still use, and where does that fit into your kind of, to your holistic approach to wellness?
Well, since osteopathy focuses so much, not just on breathing, but the balance between the four diaphragms and affecting the breath through the thoracic diaphragm. And again, like you said, that's the link to the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And that's vital to everything. Plus, it directly relates to the blood movement, so osteopathy, really focuses on that. And in fact, strengthening the muscles of breathing and putting them in balance with these other diaphragms. And So that is something I try and encourage all of my patients to at least learn some basics for things to calm your nervous system down, things to get you warmed up for movement. Going back to the spine, the thoracic diaphragm, is attached to the back. So it plays a really important role in movement of not just the spine being able to move and move with it, but the organs are tethered either from underneath to the diaphragm or from above. So the movement of the diaphragm is very important for the movement of the heart and the way the heart fills and empties. So there isn't really a way to focus completely on your health without working on the breath. And not just the way it relates to the nervous system, but the movement of the inside of the body and the fascia moves with the breath as well.
Yeah. And I think an important distinction to make, and something that I've had to kind of educate people on, is this idea that there is a difference between using the breath in that way and meditation.
Sure.
Because I think when people think about, if I say you're going to breathe a certain way, they're like, oh, you mean that meditation stuff? I can't do that.
Right.
It's too complicated. It's too hard. And meditation is really hard, right?
It can be,
Especially
for
if you're
sure.
trying to achieve this state of mindfulness, and there's this whole, like, sometimes even these religious attachments to it, or
Sure.
spiritual attachments to it. And so people have already kind of made their choice, whether they believe it or not. But I think
Right.
now what we're seeing is this really nice surge of science behind breathing. And we're starting to introduce, and just probably because the medicine has kind of caught up, right? Or at least our ability to observe what's going on in the body has allowed us to see, how breathing can affect the nervous system, how it can affect the brain, how it can even manipulate our physiology in some ways.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's exciting, but I also think that sometimes people aren't willing to invest the time that it's going to take for breathing to work for them. Like, it's a breathing
Right.
practice. And like anything else, you need to train your breath to become more efficient and more able to do the healing that you're looking for it to do. So I just wanted to add that sometimes I think people give up too early on things, especially when it
They
comes to
do.
holistic medicine. It's not the quick fix. It's not the magic
Right.
pill. It's something that does take time and needs to be practiced in order for it to work really well. But if you're willing to invest, then it can be incredibly powerful.
Right.
And the best part is it's always there, right? I think there's a quote, and I believe it came from this guy Jay Shetty, who's a monk, who does all these videos on Facebook and stuff. Anyway, in his book, he says, the first thing you're born with and the last thing you'll die with is your breath, right? It's the one thing, the one constant you will always have available is the breath. And so I think it's just such a powerful tool that's, I think, still underestimated as to how powerful it can be.
Yeah, and really in osteopathy, that is the focus, is this mechanism called the primary respiratory mechanism, is what moves. The fascia is actually moving from like a liquid to solid state with the breath, as well as, again, that's the cerebral spinal fluid. That's how it's pumping, is also with the breathing. So it really brings, again, the focus back to something that's primary and directly related to the quality of your life. And so when I'm doing osteopathic manipulation, I'm actually feeling for that rhythm in that person's body. So it gives me a good opportunity to kind of introduce that concept to people. And most people are blown away by that. They don't realize that everything in your body is moving according to that rhythm. And so once you can kind of explain that a little, they get it. And then if they can actually practice it and feel your nervous system actually changing or your brain waves changing, then it's even more powerful. So most people do get it, even no matter if they just maybe want to scratch the surface of playing with their breath. A lot of people now that are doing yoga and some other disciplines get a good introduction to it. And so it's been great to see how many people really do have a little bit of have some kind of awareness of that, and then we can kind of move into that and do some strengthening. And when they realize, like, that could make you a more powerful athlete, it can make you, it's got all these amazing effects. So
yeah, well, that was my experience when I was working with athletes. Was I'm going to introduce this breathing as a performance enhancer.
Sure.
And not as a spiritual practice, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's there's a huge difference there. And even with what was interesting with me is sometimes, like, one of the athletes I worked with, I remember I introduced her to breathing as a performance enhancer But then she realized she could also use these same breathing techniques to help manage her anxiety. Right. And so, well, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. When you say performance enhancement, yes, there is a form of physical recovery that happens through breathing, but there's also the mental focus and, you know, even the triggering of a flow state, which is something all athletes are trying to trigger.
Right.
But that was, you know, I think the big eye opener for me was that is you can go from, you know, once you feel it, like, just like you said, right? Once you
Yeah.
feel the effects, once you realize like, oh, I just did that with breathing. Now I'm encouraged to keep going and keep seeing how far I can take this. And then for some people, through all that breathing, you end up having this potentially spiritual experience, which was what
Sure.
happened to me, which then led me down this whole other path of meditation and consciousness. And they're linked, right? They're tied together.
Absolutely.
I think that
Yeah.
once you feel that connection, it's hard to, you can't really let go of that.
Yes.
So I'd like to take this in a different direction now and talk about another one of your passions and projects, which is your CBD product company.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know a little bit about the history there. How were you
Okay.
introduced to CBD? Where did the idea of creating your own products come from? And then we can maybe dive into a little bit about what your products are all about.
So because I'm here in California, CBD it kind of got legalized in stages. So I'd say about 10 years ago, you could get a card and then you could buy it. I've always known about CBD and that its effects were great for like inflammation and some other, you know, it's got some other effects and about the endocannabinoid system. And again, that's all information that really came out in the 90s. So it's pretty new. That's, you know, not super old information, but I've been reading about it and keeping up on that again, because if you're going to encourage people to really go the holistic route, I really want to stay away from, even over-the-counter drugs have their downside, right? They just do. Necessary when they're needed, but again, if you're really looking at like the longevity of like organs and what they can do over a lifetime, you want to minimize those things, right? And I've always been taught that there's plants for everything. So that was how I grew up. There was a plant that if you couldn't eat it, you could take it in another form, and that food and plants were medicine as well as movement. So I've always encouraged my patients, you're not allowed to make like, I recommend this for this, or I don't even know what'll happen now. There's people getting arrested left and right for making really general recommendations now. So things are going back in that direction where you can't say much. But I've always encouraged people like, hey, you could take this, you could try this. You need magnesium, you need, you know, turmeric, you need arnica, you need this, like during different phases of healing. So over the last, you know, 20, 21 years, I can, you know, from my using these products on myself and on my patients, have like a general idea of, you know, these are the things you need if you're injured acutely. These are the things that would aid like a chronic condition. These are the things you need just to keep your body healthy. And so once I saw that CBD was probably going to becoming legal, like to sell, rather than just going to the, you know, sending patients to the dispensary for product and stuff it's really hard to get a quality product too. So a lot of times they wouldn't get the right effect. And it's like, is it because the CBD isn't working for their system, or is it because it's a crappy product, or you know? So it was very hard to make recommendations like that without knowing what's in it. And the other thing too is a lot of times I've got 10 different things somebody should take, right? So that can be cost prohibitive too. I'm gonna send somebody to like Mother's and they're gonna spend $200 on herbs because they sprained their ankle. Again, go back to money, right? Like if they're already having to go out of their pocket to pay someone like me or pay like a copay, it really can add up. So I started thinking about if there was a way for me to make a product that included CBD, but then some of these other herbs, so that I could just give them one thing instead. And then I could maybe potentially enhance the quality of the product and maybe make a better product than what I'm seeing on the market. So that's where the idea started from. And I started thinking about, okay, what are the things I would like to see my patients not have to take an over-the-counter pill for, or even a prescription. So the big ones that stood out in my mind were painkillers, either anti-inflammatory or not. The research started coming out about 10 years ago that even Advil, like once a month, had some downsides, because again, over 30 years or whatever, that's a really long time to take something. Painkillers were a big one. Sleep aid and anti-anxiety medications were another one that I see that people just don't have a good alternative. You can't just demonize something and be like, these things are bad, and then not give somebody an alternative. I mean, we all have to live and get sleep and whatever. So I thought, okay, that's another one. I would wind up in my own life using Advil at least once a month during my cycle. So I thought, okay, there's a product right there, is to target that. And then what would I do? We know CBD is something you can use just to keep your body well, right? Because you've got all these receptors all over. So I thought, okay, there would be a product then for healing or just general overall health. And then I know how people are about ingesting things. So I thought, well, it would be nice if I could have a couple of topical products, maybe for people who, first of all, there's a lot of restrictions even still federally for federal employees, for anybody who's in the Olympics or athletes. CBD can be still prohibited, which is really strange. But so I wanted a topical, thinking, well, those people may be more hesitant to put something inside their body. And so I just started writing down, like, what would that look like? What herbs would I want in each one of these products? Like my wish list, like if I could get everything in a product. And then I had to, make it happen. So I had to find a company that had CBD that was coming from a clean source. I'm not going to say all American hemp is not clean, but our regulations for calling something organic or certified organic, I mean, it's very self-regulated. That's like asking, the diamond guy, is this a conflict diamond? Like, of course it is. He's the one regulating his own industry. And so it's a little shady. I hate to say that. I'm probably going to get taken away by goons or something, but no, it really is. It's just, a lot of it's BS. Again, if the soil's contaminated and they're spraying on the fields around. So I found this company that the hemp is coming from the Netherlands. That's a really old place where they've been growing hemp for a long time, not using pesticides. I'm a lot more confident in some of the regulations there than the ones that we have, and we can get it. And they use this super clean extraction process that's done in Germany. Then the product comes here. And then I found a couple of labs that had great chemical engineers that I worked with to see if, okay, how much of my product could be made into a reality, or is this just, like, there's no way to get all this stuff in one product? Do they combine okay? What's it gonna taste like? Because I definitely don't want to use like weird flavoring or any of that. So it took a few years to get that all sorted out and get samples. And then the other problem was making sure the other parts of the product were clean. And then I have to make sure it doesn't cost $1 million, because that doesn't do anybody any good if it's too expensive, So that was basically how it all came about. And I really feel like I got lucky that I found some great people who understood my vision. This was a big parent company, the CBD company. And so my product is kind of like a little boutique product that they help produce. And the fact that they were interested in doing it, and the CEO of that company was like, he was really encouraging and really fired up to help produce it. So, which was awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is awesome. And I think that, I got turned on to your products when we first met a little while back. And what I appreciated about it is the fact that these are formulations, right? The fact that there
Right.
are these other ingredients, what it said to me was that there was way more thought that went behind the product, only because like I think CBD has exploded in the past
Yeah.
few years, that
Hmm.
everything has CBD in it. You can buy
Right.
cookies with CBD, soap with CBD, like, and it's
Right.
obvious that so many companies are just going to jump on the CBD bandwagon just so that they
Right.
can profit from this thing that's become so incredibly popular. But how do I know what's working, what's not, what's legit,
Right.
what's not, what's clean, what's not? Obviously, people are going to try to take advantage of that situation. Obviously, there's going to be some really crappy products out there, but how can
Sure.
I possibly know between this bottle of CBD and this bottle of CBD and this product? Like, how can I possibly know which one's good and which one's not? But when
Right.
I saw your products and the idea that you had these formulations, which meant that, yes, CBD is a great product, but it's going to be enhanced by these other things that are also great for this specific thing that we want to help you with. And the
Right.
fact that that was available to me just right away gave it a different level of credibility, because it
Mm.
meant that thought went behind this. It wasn't just I'm putting CBD in a bottle and selling it. Like, there was
Right.
obviously someone behind this product that was really thinking deeply about what is going to go into this. And I
Yeah.
think that to me is just, especially in a very competitive market, that was the
It
turn on,
is. Yeah.
was the fact that, all right, I'm getting the benefits of CBD, which I do believe in. And I'd
Hmm.
had great products in the past and had,
Good
good
effects.
effects
Yeah.
from it. I had success. But then to have these extra elements and this extra ingredients, it just made it, I don't know, it just differentiated it from everything else. And I'm not trying to plug you at all in this way. It's just that was my experience,
Well, I'm
and
glad to hear
since
that.
then,
Yeah.
yeah, and since then, I use your products, and I do like the fact that, oh, my back hurts or something's in pain, I can reach for the pain bottle, right?
Right.
Or I know that I'm going to need some help sleeping, I can reach for the calm bottle. And so there's
Sure.
these specific reasons to use these products, and
Yeah.
then you kind of learn when to use them, when to not use them. And
Right.
um yeah, so I really appreciate that quite a bit, the fact that there's obviously that. And then once I got to know you better, you're obviously someone who cares. You're a doctor, you're someone who heals people, so you're obviously not in this to just put something out there that will make you money.
Right.
You actually want to create products that will be part of this purpose that you have, which is to heal people.
Yeah.
So all that to say that I'm a big believer in the work
Ah.
that you do. And
Oh, thanks.
yeah,
I'm
and
glad.
I'm excited to be able to offer people that are listening that we'll have a link available for people who want to check out your products, and a discount attached to that. So
Awesome.
I think it's really cool. Well, Winnie, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I
Absolutely.
think we dove into some important stuff here, and I hope, if there's one thing that I want people to take away from this, is just how important it is to take some responsibility for your own health, and to
Yeah.
not, I think there are some cases where, like we said, where the medical system is designed for, like, hey, if you break your leg, don't try to heal that by yourself at home. Go to
Don't
the
call me.
hospital. Yeah, don't call Winnie, and don't try to put some herbs on your leg to see if it'll
Yeah.
fix it, because it's not going to work. That's where, we really need that medical system.
Sure.
But if you are dealing with chronic pain, or if you just know that you're just not living a healthy lifestyle, and you want to make, it's our responsibility to make those changes, because no one's going to make them for us.
Right.
And why wait until it's too late? There's so much that we can do now to take
Hmm.
control of our own bodies, and to better understand what's going on, and to go back to simple things like breathing, which can have such a powerful effect on our health. And I think we need to stop underestimating what seems simple can work. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
complicated for it to work. So anyway, thank you so much. Like I
Oh, you're
said, there will
welcome.
be links available so people can discover more about your products and the things that you do. And once again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Great. Thanks for having me, Patrick.